Bishop Philip Jones has been a dear friend of mine for 25 years. It's my privilege to ask him to come forward to introduce our next plenary speaker, Bishop Jones.
The theme of our conference has been to grow out on a limb. Well, let me tell you, when you go and grow out on that limb, you never know who you're going to meet. And our next speaker, Todd Hunter, is a man that we are meeting out on the limb, as he is out on the limb bearing fruit, and we're out on the limb bearing fruit. And now our lives are connected in ways that we could not have imagined even a year ago. Todd Hunter has been involved, for example, in church planting since he was 20 years old, been doing it for 30 years. He has been involved in the Vineyard movement, which has over 1,000 churches worldwide. He's been a key ingredient of that growth. Todd Hunter has also been the national director of Alpha. You're familiar with Alpha, of course. That's out there on the limb. He is also the author of a new book called Christianity Beyond Belief. There are 50 of these for sale. They just came in a moment ago, so you can look at that later on today. And Todd Hunter's story about coming to the Anglican Mission is a very interesting one. He began to kind of look up some information on the website and found out things about it, talked to some people that he knew, Ron McCrary and some others, and then he called Bishop Chuck on his own and said, I want to come out and talk to you. And so he's been on this trail towards the Anglican world. But what's great is how much he brings to us from the riches of his experience in planting all those kinds of churches. Do you realize that 1/3 of the U.S. population lives in 7 western states? Well, that's where Todd is going to be. And that's where he's going to be working on planting churches and developing churches and things of that nature. And what he brings to us is something from the non-Anglican background that can enrich us as we continue to enrich him with the strength and tradition that we have from our backgrounds, both of us bearing fruit, both of us for the kingdom. And I remember during the ordination when I gave him his stole, he said, what is this? And I said, well, this is a stole. You need to put it on. Well, how do you do that? So we kind of went through all that. And last night he showed up in full regalia with an alb and a collar, I think you had, and a stole and everything. So you are now one of us as we are one with you. We are so grateful, Todd, to have you here. His wife, Debbie, is here, and his daughter, Carol. Jonathan could not make it. And they make their home in Idaho for the moment until they move further west where he begins the church planting. Will you welcome Todd Hunter?
Thank you, Philip. I was hoping I would be able to talk about my Anglican stupidity, but you brought it up, so thank you very much. And Chuck, thank you very much for that talk this morning. I told Chuck at the break, I will follow you up that hill. I can gladly follow you and our African bishops and our U.S. bishops up that hill. Happy to do it. I want to do this, it's both because it's important to me personally and kind of just for the record, to thank all of you in the Anglican Mission for your amazingly warm and respectful welcome of me, beginning, of course, with Chuck and Susan and Cynthia and Ellis and H and Alan and Sandy Green, who was one of the very first people I think I met, Sandy and his wife. I happened to be in Denver and met them, and David Bryan and Comforted Keene, who we served on a board together, Bob Grant, Thad Barnum. His book, Never Silent, was a major impetus of the Holy Spirit for me to feel really connected to this. And so I'm very grateful for that. I grew up in the Methodist Church, so I'm sort of like a cousin, all right? So you can at least grant me a little something here. And I've never had very many religious artifacts in my life. In fact, I have one. And the present national director of Vineyard Churches in the United Kingdom, who was formerly an Anglican, so I guess this goes both ways. Anyway, let's not talk about that right now. He knew I was a big fan of Wesley, and he found in this, I don't remember what town we were in England, it's 20 or 25 years ago, he found this little statue, an antique statue of Wesley. And it's the only thing I have ever had in my office that was in any way religious. And of course, with John Wimber, I followed him as the president of Vineyard Churches. And because of Wimber, there's always been a very deep Anglican connection. I never knew David Watson, I only heard the legends of David Watson. But of course, I knew David Pitchess and Sandy Miller, and of course, Nikki Gumbel now at HTB, and the founder of the Alpha Course. And just as I've thought about this over the last 6 or so months of coming into the mission, it dawned on me that it's just sort of accidentally. I didn't wake up one morning and think, hey, I think I want to be an Anglican. This happened completely out of the blue for me. But as I look back, I realized that my favorite theologians as a young man were people like J.I. Packer and John Stott. Later, Tom Wright, the Bishop of Durham. My very favorite missiologists are Roland Allen and Leslie Newbegin. And I've often said to friends over the last few months who've asked me what I'm doing, I don't know quite how to say it except for to say that I feel very comfortable with what I think of as the English Reformation. Not so much the Continental Reformation. I don't have any problems with Calvin and Luther, Zwingli, or those guys, but I feel more intellectually comfortable with what I used to call British evangelicalism. And I've learned over the last few months that what I really meant was Anglicanism. I just didn't know that's what I meant. But I've always been very comfortable with British evangelicalism. And I'm just saying all this to say that I know that any good that I can do in the West Coast is standing on the shoulders of people like Archbishop Collini and Archbishop Moses Tay and the American bishops and all that you guys have done. I just want to say that I completely agree with what Chuck was saying, that there's something sovereign going on here. And I realize that I'm simply caught up into something that's not of my making. So before we get into the talk, I want to make a deal with you, though. I am going to go out on a limb on the West Coast, and so I want us to have sort of a covenant together. If you'll promise to take all the credit for any good that happens, I'll take all the blame for any of the missional risk-taking, experimenting we do, because I know that's actually the way this whole thing works. So, you are taking a risk here, I should say, but no more of a risk than John Wimber, the founder of the Vineyard, and Chuck Smith, the founder of Calvary Chapel, made with me. When I was 23 years old, as Philip said, I moved from Santa Ana, California, all the way across the country to Wheeling, West Virginia, which is situated sort of between Columbus, Ohio, and Pittsburgh. I moved to a city that I'd never been to in my life, my wife and I. We didn't know one person there, and we started a church. That church is now 30 years old. This fall, it's, somewhere over 1,000 people. Out of that church, we planted, I don't actually remember how many churches. And so, as Philip said, I've kind of been doing this my whole life, and I'm delighted to be doing it with you guys. All right, so that's just sort of for the record. Ready to go? All right. The title of this talk is The Gospel of the Kingdom as a Basis for Evangelistic Church Planting. And my real goal is to just try to be helpful today in the midst of what you guys are already doing. And so I think what I want to say is this, that all approaches to evangelism, all approaches to church planting are contextual. There's no such thing as a decontextualized way of doing evangelism. There's no such thing as a decontextualized way of doing church planting. We're always doing this within a context. And as Chuck said last night, we happen to be doing it within a rapidly changing context. And part of this rapidly changing context is a major pushback from general society toward the church, a major pushback towards Christianity and towards religion in general. So I want to show you just a few slides here that I've seen over the last few years that sort of demonstrate this societal pushback. And I need to ask you, because I'm aware that, we use this term post-Christendom a lot these days, but I'm aware that in America, post-Christendom is sort of like our red-blue states, when we talk politics. And I'm aware that I'm in the Southeast, and that in the Southeast, there is still a lot of Christendom. But you come west with me, you're not going to find a lot of it in West L.A., you're not going to find a lot of it in San Francisco or Portland or Seattle. But you may not have seen some of this. So what I want you to do is look at this as a missionary and just to see what it is that our society is saying back to us. So let's take a look at these slides. This is a billboard that was mostly in the East. And it's, let's just put it this way. The atheists have gone evangelistic. And they've picked up on all of our media techniques to try to evangelize for their atheistic point of view. So this one says, don't believe in God? Don't worry, you're not alone. Or this one. Have you seen this one? Place all refuse in the can. And there you have symbols for all the world's major religions, including, look what's first to go in the can, Christianity. Or this one. This one I found on a bumper sticker in Colorado Springs. Now, I got no beef with Jim Dobson, and I got no beef with Focus on the Family. But this is our culture saying back to us basically, shut up. We're tired of hearing you talk about sexual ethics. We're tired of hearing you talk about relational ethics and economic ethics. They're basically saying, shut up. We're tired of you talking to us. We're tired of all your yakking. Focus on your own family. Or this one. What if the hokey pokey really is what it's all about? You put your right foot in, you put your... Or how about this one? This is the kind of thing that I, would regularly see around Seattle and Portland, and San Francisco, and other places. You see, they've spelled out tolerance with all the world's religions equals peace. And again, basically the message from the world in this is sort of, again, lighten up. Let go of all of your distinctives, because to the degree that you hold on to your distinctives, to the degree that you hold on to any uniquenesses concerning the person and work of Christ, or anything like that, then you're now the problem on earth. Because the one thing, of course, that's venerated today, as I suppose we all know, is tolerance. Or how about this one? This is an actual media campaign that was happening just this last fall in Chicago. So, like when Billy Graham used to come to town, there would be media all over announcing he's coming. Well, in Chicago this fall, they had this big media campaign. And if you can read the top of the bus, just think how insidious this is. Islam, the way of life of Noah, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and Muhammad. Or how about this one? One more. This is a Subway ad campaign that was happening just this Christmas in New York City and in other places. It says, why believe in a God? Just be good for goodness sake. Now, I don't know about you, but I see this as a major change in culture. When I first started planting churches in the 70s, our biggest issue was it okay to have a band? Like, was Andy Piercy of the devil or of God? That was the big question in the 70s, right? I know some of you still wonder, but remember, some of you remember a guy called Bob Larson, who used to actually write books when I was a young Calvary Chapel pastor in the 70s, when Maranatha music was just beginning to happen. He actually wrote books saying that to have guitars or drums or that kind of thing in church was of the devil. That was our biggest problem. But now we live in a day, there's a children's program going on here somewhere, isn't there? Or youth? So here's what's happening today, though. What the new atheism is saying, what this growing thing in our culture is saying is this: that over there where we are teaching our children is evil. It's evil, it's wrong. You would never force the Easter bunny down the throat of your 17-year-old, and if you found your neighbor trying to do that, you'd call social services on them. You'd never try to talk your 15-year-old into the reality of Santa Claus. Why then would you force upon your children something that we know is wrong? And furthermore, unless we stomp out religion on the earth, religion itself will be the prime animating destructive force in all of human affairs. This is not the 70s. This is not post-World War II, out of which Billy Graham and Bill Bright and James Kennedy and all of our forefathers in evangelism came out of. And I can guarantee you, we'll never see Billy in public again, God bless him. But if Billy could stand here on this podium with us today, Billy would not say, go do what I did. Go do crusades with yellow mums all over the front of the stage and light blue carpeting and all the Graham stuff. He would say, no, go do what I did in this sense. Find what the Holy Spirit is saying for you to do and go do that. Because you're not going to reach postmodern, post-Christian, secular America with the tools that Billy was able to use. It can't be done. Think about it. When Billy stood on a stage, just picture him doing this. Billy standing in a great stadium somewhere saying, you may have been baptized, You might have been confirmed. But tonight, you don't have what? A personal relationship with Jesus Christ.